Okay, Senator Ortiz y Pino.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not sure exactly what the point of this would be, to be honest. We already know that certain lobbyists are paid for by certain companies, or they're employed by certain companies, and we know that those companies favor the legislation or oppose the legislation. What do we gain from having each individual lobbyist identify? I mean, it's a little bit like, my fear is it's going to be a little bit like these scorecards that come out. Conservation voters, friendly to pets scorecard, all of these things. And there's no nuance to it. It's just, he voted, or he was absent the day this vote took place, or it doesn't reflect the fact that you tried to amend the bill to make it more workable. It doesn't reflect the fact that you were against it because an amendment was put on that, in your opinion, screwed it up. It doesn't reflect any of the stuff that goes on here other than just yay or nay. And I just don't know if it's of any use. First of all, we're the accountable ones, not the lobbyists. I mean, our voting record ought to be made clear. We had the thing the other day with the, it was in this committee, I think, where the same, or maybe it was in my public affairs committee. I have a fragile memory.
No, it was here. It was here.
It was here. The lobbyist stood up and said, well, I'm employed by two different groups. For this one, I oppose the bill, and for this one, I support the bill. Well,
Yeah. How does that report?
I don't know how he would make his report. I mean, I just don't know what you gain from this that we don't already say by putting our votes out there publicly, and by the lobbyists saying who hired them in the first place.
Yes.
So if you could address
I
that.
would love to. I would love to. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator, for the question. You know, I think in this, first of all, the public, I believe, has a right to know not just what we do, but the other mechanics that go into the process up here. That's why we have a whole body of disclosure focused on money that is spent to influence and, you know, all the mechanics of that. It's kind of what I was just thinking about while you were talking, a little bit like food nutrition. You may see the final product that says muffin, but does the public have a right to know the chemicals that are used, the other ingredients that are used? Does that not then raise questions about manufacturing, about the health of it, about, you know, chemical, you know, bad things that might be in that? I think it's kind of, we are in an ecosystem here, and our vote may be the end of the process, but it is not the whole story, and it is certainly not, the public's interest is not just in what we do, it is in all the mechanics of what goes on here. So I think the reality is, and we all know this, is that the bills and the actions that happen in our government are not just what we see in front of us in this committee room. It's what may happen down the street. It may be what happens in the hallway or on the telephone. Quite frankly, much of the time may not know the mechanics behind what was working to kill a bill, pass a bill, etc. But I believe that's every bit as much in the public interest of knowing that as what happens in front of you, that you're saying, well, we already know that, but that's not the whole story. I think the definition of lobbying in our state covers trying to influence legislation or executive action. And I believe that part of that disclosure is knowing who exactly is trying to do that. And granted, you know, the public could come up with inappropriate conclusions about, oh, well, you're aligned with this list of people or you're not. But it's disclosure, I will say, that's required in some states where they require lobbyists to report the bills that they're lobbying on, the position they're trying to take. And it's just more towards full disclosure than having that part of what produces policy being, the public be in the dark on that. And I just think all of it should be on the table. As you know, I've kind of worked on all pieces of this, and I think it all should be out on the table and let the chips fall where they may.
Madam Chairman, with all due respect, Senator, I just think it's unworkable. I mean, think of the scenario that's not an unusual one here, where a lobbyist comes to you and says, would you put this amendment on the bill? Now, you look at the amendment and you know this is a death, if we put this amendment on, it'll kill it because the committee won't approve it. But what does he report then? That he's for the bill because he wanted you to pass the bill, but he wanted it with that amendment? Or does he put down that he's against the bill because he knew as well as you did that putting that amendment on would get it killed in the committee? He could with a straight face go either way. We wouldn't know any more about his employer's intent or the mechanisms that go into making legislation. I think what you're after here is full and honest disclosure, which is why we televise these committee meetings and why we don't televise them. What do we do? Webcast these committee meetings.
It should be easy.
But you still don't know what goes on in the hallway. You don't know what goes on in the caucuses. There's just a limit to what the public is going to be able to find out about what goes on here. But what they will know for sure is the final result. And that's where they hold us responsible for the final results. So I don't know. I'll listen to the rest of the debate, but I'm not sure that what you're after here in your bill is going to provide much additional, any more than those scorecards tell us how we really feel about keeping pets safe or protecting the environment because of 5 bills they picked at random from a,
Madam Chair and Senator, appreciate your comments. You know, the issue of whether or not they're for or against it definitely is problematic, and it's nuanced, and it can change with an amendment. So I agree with you. That part of this bill is challenging to deal with and probably would need work, But the issue over whether or not they lobbied on a bill, regardless of what they did, certainly would be easy to comply with. And I think it is illustrative because it would help show all the forces that worked on a piece of legislation, not just what you see. And I think that would be powerful information, quite frankly.